Okay, class, I have put together a pretty neat slide, our tutorial on examples for different Boney landmark names. So I'm going to go through each example, click on it, and briefly speak about each one. So here are examples of tubercles. You have a greater, which is the larger tubercle, and the lesser tubercle. And as we get into the shoulder, I just want you to notice that the greater tubercle is located more posteriorly, which means in the back or behind. And the lesser tubercle is located here in the front or towards the anterior surface. You will get familiar with those terms eventually. I know those are new, anterior and posterior. Some of you may know them, but I want you to get used to them because we're going to be learning a lot of position terminology as well. The next one is your tibial tuberosity, which is located on the tibia. This bone is the tibia, and here is your tuberosity. And as you can see, it's a nice little projection of that bone. So a tuberosity versus a tubercle, the difference is that tubercles are not quite as big of a projection. So very similar terms, one's just smaller than the other. Go back to the tubercles. And you have two small tubercles on the humerus. What's really neat here, and what I'd like you to see as we do eventually get into the shoulder anatomy, is you'll see this little groove right here, also known as a sulcus, which we'll learn here in a little bit. It's another term. Some people call it a groove. It's actually the groove for the biceps, and we call it the bicipital groove. And there's biceps means there's two muscle bellies, one going this way and another one comes up and attaches here on this corcoid. Again, this video is just, you don't need to know those terms, just know the Boney landmark terms, but it's neat to see the anatomy and discuss it with you. So eventually we'll go over where the bicep is located, but most of you know the bicep, which is why I'm discussing it here. Next one, the superior temporal line. So line is one of your terms in the course that we're introducing for Boney landmarks in anatomy. So you actually have two temporal lines. One is a superior, which means above, and one is an inferior. So here's the inferior temporal line and the superior temporal line. And they say temporal because of its location. This, I can't click on it right now. This is your temporal bone, or temporal area of the brain. You have a frontal area of the brain. This is your frontal bone. These little lines here are called suture joints. Here's your occipital bone. But again, this video is just for the Boney landmarks. So superior temporal line and inferior temporal line. Okay, the next term you have is a crest. What is a crest? An iliac crest. And if you go to your, I'm not going to give you all the definitions here of what a crest is, but you can see what a crest looks like. And then look at your Excel sheet for the description of what a crest is. Actually, you guys are going to fill that in, and then we'll discuss it later in class. The next one, obturator foramen. A foramen is simply a hole in the body, and it's usually a hole for places for other soft tissues to run through. So, and here, this is where you'll see, this is actually a large supply of arteries and nerves that start way up here in the heart. Actually, this is pretty cool, so I can build for you. I can't build now, but I'll try it a little bit later. But you have arteries and nerves that run through this hole here and feed the leg. And I was going to try to build the body up for you so you can see that happening. But in this record mode, it's not working. The next one is the talar sulcus. This bone here is known as your talus. And this line here, just like the bicipital groove or bicipital sulcus, is another sulcus underneath the heel. What I want you to notice here is that the calcaneus is missing on this bone. You have to pull it away so you can see it. So I have cut that away for you so you can see the sulcus. All right, the next one is your nasal cavity or nasal sinuses. I know you all have heard of nasal sinuses, but here's a great example. Many different viewing angles of a sinus cavity. And I did have originally this maxilla bone removed for you. You can see it, so you could see it better. We can actually take a tour this way and look at it as well. So there's your sinus cavities. Pretty cool. Okay. Ischial spine. It's pronounced ischial or ischium. So here is the ischial spine. So your pelvis bone, this is the spine of the ischium. Another cool place where you have a spine in your body, I didn't label it for this diagram, but I'll show it to you. This is a spine. It looks similar to the crest on the pelvis, so you can see crests and spines sometimes can be interchangeable, even lines. Usually a line is something smaller on a bone, like, see if we can find a line on the humerus here. There is a line. Sometimes it's not very pronounced, but there is a line. Right in through here is the line on the humerus. Okay, coracoid process. There it is, this little pink guy here, and it's labeling it for you, the coracoid process. Are there other parts of the body that protrude or stick out like a process does? And this is a very important part of the shoulder because it's an attachment site for lots of ligaments and muscles and other things. So another key feature we'll discuss a lot is design and function, right? So it looks funny, but it has a purpose because of its design. Its design is purposeful so that it can function to help be an attachment site for muscles in your body and ligaments and a few other things. So you'll hear the term design and function a ton in this course. We did coracoid process, that was it right there. And then lateral part of the occipital bone, that is actually a condyle, and that shouldn't be labeled lateral part. I'll see if I can isolate out the condyle. But right in here, this bone, this area of your occiput, which is the base of your skull. Here's another foramen, by the way. Your nerves from your brain come down and travel right through all of your vertebrae here. This is fun. I'll get back to that. I kind of sometimes get a little ADD because this is so fun to drive through the human body here like this. But this is where your spinal cord runs through, right in through that foramen. But let's get back to the condyle. So you have two occipital condyles. One right here that meets your first cervical vertebrae. And here's your other occipital condyle right in here, which meets this. And you also have condyles in your knee and in many places throughout the body. So let me show you the condyles of the knee. This is a condyle here, and this is the other condyle of the knee. Moving forward, supraspinous and infraspinous fossa. So remember I said this is the spine. Some people call this a spine. Spine of the shoulder blade. So supra means above. And your term that we're learning today is fossa. So a fossa is almost like a valley between two mountains. That's the best way to describe it. So here is a fossa, and it's the valley between this part of the shoulder blade and the spine of the shoulder blade here. And here is another fossa underneath. And both fossas happen to be attachment sites for muscles. Many of you have heard of them, but they are, or heard of them but didn't know they're located, most likely. And those are attachment sites for your rotator cuff muscles. And guess what they're called? The supraspinatus muscle and the infraspinatus muscle. And they're both located in the supra and infraspinatus fossas. So you'll learn a lot of times they try to use the names and make it, kind of try to keep it as simple as possible when naming things. So they're named for their location and whatnot. So here's your infraspinatus fossa and your supraspinatus fossa. And the mental tubercle. So one we probably won't use a ton in this course, but I wanted to give you an example of a tubercle. Most people have, well, everyone has two tubercles. Some have more pronounced tubercles than others. And the tubercles, when you put the layer of skin on, are what give you a natural dimple in the front of your chin right here in the skin. So the two tubercles are pronounced areas or projections of the bone. And this one is not, in this skeleton, it's not a very pronounced tubercle. Some have other very large pronounced tubercles. And they do serve a purpose. They're attachment sites for muscles for facial expression. So they need an anchor point. And so the next one is the head, the term head. Here is the head of the femur in the body. That's an example of a head. And articulation is simply where two bones meet to form a joint. So you can think of the term articulation as joint. And now, with that being said, you can probably name lots of joints in the body, or point out lots of joints in the body. But where the femur meets the tibia is a joint. And now the next one, a foramen. which I already introduced once. Your occipital foramen is here, and there are other foramens throughout the body. They're holes. Foramens are a little bit different than canals because it's just a hole. So the next one we're going to go to is the ear canal. Here, I thought did we do the ear canal? Well, I thought the canal was in here. Alexa, dismiss. Sorry about that. Boy, I thought I put the ear canal in here. We'll go to it, but it's not one of the clickable options here. Occipital foramen is here. And the occiput is the bone at the base of your skull. So the hole in the base of your skull, basically, where your spinal cord runs out. Here's a vertebral or vertebrae facet. So a facet is a flat surface where two bones meet usually, and it forms a joint. So if you notice, this is one vertebrae here, and here's the next one. And where they meet, they form a flat surface called a facet. And that facet is designed to allow the bones to rotate on each other. So when you bend over, you can flex and extend your spine left and right, forward and back, and this allows for that movement here. Same thing moving up. So here's another facet joint. And you can see for where each vertebrae meets, it forms a facet. So you have top and bottom facets on both vertebrae. So each vertebrae itself has 4 facets that form 4 joints. So facet joints. And then the last one, transverse process. So the term in this one is process. Transverse process of the vertebrae. And here is another process. So we have the coracoid process and the transverse process. And there are many other processes throughout the body. And your job in this next assignment is to come up with other processes and other, all of the other terms. So in the Excel sheet on the right side, in the right column, you're going to come up with pictures of other processes in the body and other foramens and crusts, just so you have practice in identifying these structures in the skeleton. And that's about it for this video. Please email or jump into one of the Zoom sessions if you have questions about the assignment here. And hopefully seeing this video is a lot easier than the Excel sheet that I've put together for you, which is here. So in the Excel sheet you have examples of markings, bony markings, articulations, where two bones is a definition is where two bones meet. And then an example is the knee joint. And the next one, the head. And I put a picture of the femoral head in there for you. And then there's other places where there's a head. So your assignment would be to come over here and fill in line E and give me, or column, or row E, column E, excuse me, put in pictures of other examples of each. Again, Zoom me or email me if you have questions, and I'll make sure I have office hours for you to meet if you have questions.